What if I told you that somewhere, right now, maybe just outside your window, maybe on the corner of your street, there is a living organism that has been quietly manufacturing the most powerful medicine your body will ever encounter? It doesn't come in a bottle. It doesn't require a prescription. It has never been advertised. And it has been doing this, silently, tirelessly, for longer than any civilization has existed on this planet. It's a tree. Now, before you roll your eyes, before that voice in the back of your head whispers, "Oh great, another video telling me to hug a tree," I need you to stay with me for a moment, because this is not about sentimentality. This is not about some vague, feel-good idea that nature is nice. What I'm about to walk you through is something far stranger, far more specific, and, honestly, far more unsettling than that. Because over the last 2 decades, scientists in Japan, South Korea, the United States, and across Europe have been quietly assembling a body of evidence that suggests something remarkable, that the simple act of placing your hand on a tree, skin to bark, initiates a cascade of measurable, physiological changes inside your body. Changes to your blood, changes to your immune system, changes to the electrical activity in your brain. And perhaps the most startling part? Some of these changes last for days after you walk away. So the question is not really whether you should touch a tree. The question is, why does touching a tree do anything at all? What is happening at the molecular level, at the cellular level, at the level of your nervous system, in that quiet moment of contact? That's what we're going to find out. And the answer, I promise you, is not what you expect. Let's start with something deceptively simple. Think about the last time you touched a tree. Not bumped against one, not leaned your back against one while scrolling your phone. I mean actually touched one, deliberately, slowly with your bare hand. Felt the texture of the bark under your fingertips, the ridges, the roughness, the unexpected coolness or warmth of a living thing that is nothing like your skin, and yet is, in some fundamental way, alive in the same world you are. If you can't remember the last time that happened, you're not alone. Most adults in industrialized societies go weeks, sometimes months, without making deliberate physical contact with anything that isn't manufactured. Our fingers touch screens, keyboards, steering wheels, doorknobs, synthetic fabrics. We live inside a sensory cocoon of human-made surfaces, and somewhere along the way we stop noticing what we lost. Here's why that matters. Your skin is not a passive wrapper. It is an organ, the largest organ in your body, and it is studded with millions of sensory receptors, each one a sophisticated biological instrument designed to read the world through touch. There are receptors for pressure, for vibration, for temperature, for texture. And this is the part that matters here. There is a specific class of nerve fibers called C-tactile afferents. These are slow, unmyelinated fibers that respond not to sharp or sudden touch, but to gentle, sustained, stroking contact. And when they fire, they don't just send a signal that says, "I'm touching something." They send a signal that activates the brain's social and emotional processing centers. They trigger the release of oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, and they lower cortisol, the hormone most associated with chronic stress. These nerve fibers evolved over millions of years. They evolved in a world where the textures your skin encountered were bark, stone, soil, water, leaves, fur, not glass, not plastic, not the smooth, dead surface of a phone screen. So when you place your hand on a tree, something happens that hasn't happened to those receptors in a very long time. The bark is irregular. It's complex. It's alive with micro-texture that changes with temperature and moisture. It is, from the perspective of your C-tactile afferents, interesting, in a way that almost nothing in your daily environment is anymore. And the signal those nerves send to your brain is not just, "I'm touching a tree." The signal is closer to, "I'm home." That may sound poetic, but it is grounded in a concept that the great biologist Edward O. Wilson called the biophilia hypothesis. Wilson proposed, back in 1984, that human beings carry within them an innate, genetically encoded tendency to seek connection with nature and other living organisms, not as a luxury, not as a preference, as a need woven into us by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution in landscapes dominated by trees, water, and green growing things. The biophilia hypothesis was, for years, treated as an interesting but unprovable idea. A nice story, perhaps, but not science. Then the data started coming in, and the data has been relentless. In 1982, the Japanese government did something unusual. The Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries officially introduced a public health practice called Shinrin-yoku. The term translates literally as forest bathing. It does not mean bathing in a forest stream. It means immersing yourself, slowly, deliberately, with all your senses, in the atmosphere of a forest. Walking among trees, breathing their air, touching them. At first, this sounded like exactly the kind of soft, feel-good wellness trend that hard science tends to ignore. But Japan didn't ignore it. Japan studied it, rigorously, for decades. And what they found changed the way we think about trees forever. The key figure in this research is Dr. Ching Li, a professor at Nippon Medical School in Tokyo and one of the world's foremost experts on forest medicine. Over the course of numerous studies, Li and his colleagues documented something extraordinary. When people spent time among trees, walking through forests, touching bark, breathing forest air, their blood showed a significant increase in a particular type of immune cell called a natural killer cell. NK cells, as they're known in immunology, are part of your body's innate immune system. They are, quite literally, your body's frontline defense against cancer. NK cells patrol your bloodstream, identifying cells that have become cancerous or been infected by viruses, and they destroy them, not through a learned response, not through antibodies, through direct, immediate killing. And after a 3-day forest bathing trip, participants in Li's studies showed NK cell increases of up to 50%. Even more remarkable, and this is the part that made the scientific community sit up and pay very close attention, these elevated NK cell levels persisted for more than 7 days after the participants returned to their normal urban lives. 7 days, from spending time among trees. Now, here is where the story takes its most fascinating turn, because the obvious question is, why? What is it about trees that boosts your immune system? Is it just the fresh air? The exercise of walking? The psychological benefit of relaxation? Li's team tested this. They took participants and had them walk through urban environments for the same duration, at the same pace. No change in NK cells. They had participants stay in hotel rooms in the city and simply relax. No significant immune boost. Then they ran the critical experiment. They placed diffusers containing phytoncides, volatile organic compounds naturally released by trees, into hotel rooms. Participants just slept there overnight, breathing in these tree-released chemicals. No forest, no walking. No nature experience. Their NK cells went up. Phytoncides. Remember that word. It comes from the Greek phyton, meaning plant, and cide, meaning to kill. These are the chemical weapons of the tree kingdom. Trees release phytoncides into the air as a defense mechanism, to fight off bacteria, fungi, and insects that would otherwise devour them. Compounds like alpha-pinene, beta-pinene, and D-limonene drift constantly from the leaves, bark, and wood of living trees, forming an invisible chemical cloud that surrounds every forest on Earth. And when you breathe them in, or when your skin absorbs them through direct contact with bark, your body doesn't just passively receive them. Your immune system responds. It upregulates. It becomes more vigilant. Your NK cells not only increase in number, but they begin producing higher levels of anti-cancer proteins, perforin, granulysin, and granzymes A and B, the molecular weapons that NK cells use to punch holes in cancerous cells and trigger their self-destruction. Let me say that again, because I want you to fully absorb what this means. The air around a tree contains chemicals that, when inhaled or absorbed through your skin, cause your body to produce more cancer-killing cells and make those cells more effective at their job. This isn't folklore. This is published research in peer-reviewed immunology journals. Studies from Nippon Medical School, from Chungbuk National University in South Korea, systematic reviews published in journals like Environmental Health and Preventive Medicine. The data is there, and it all points in the same direction. Now, here's what makes this relevant to the act of touching a tree specifically. Phytoncide concentration is highest in the bark. When you place your hand on a tree trunk, you are placing your skin, porous, absorptive, rich with blood vessels just below the surface, directly against the densest source of these compounds. You are not just near the tree's pharmacy. You are in it. The molecules are entering through your skin. They are entering through every breath you take in that close proximity. And this is happening whether you know it or not, whether you believe in it or not. The chemistry doesn't require your faith. It just requires your presence. But phytoncides are only part of the story, because something else is happening when your hand meets bark, something that operates on a completely different channel. And to understand it, we need to talk about electricity. You are an electrical being. That is not a metaphor. Every thought you think, every heartbeat, every nerve impulse that tells your hand to open or your eyes to blink, all of it is electrical. Your brain operates on a field of measurable electrical activity. Your heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field of any organ in your body, detectable several feet away from your skin. You are, in the most literal sense, a walking, breathing, thinking electrical system. And here's what most people never consider. You are an electrical system that evolved in direct, constant contact with the Earth, a planet that is itself a massive electrical body, carrying a negative surface charge maintained by thousands of lightning strikes happening around the globe at any given moment. For most of human history, this wasn't interesting. It was just life. We walked barefoot. We slept on the ground. We were in constant conductive contact with the Earth's electrical field. Our biology developed in the context of that contact. It was the background hum against which every cell in our body learned to function. And then, roughly 150 years ago, in the blink of an evolutionary eye, we severed that connection. We put rubber soles on our shoes. We raised ourselves off the ground on insulated floors. We wrapped ourselves in synthetic fabrics. We built homes and offices that are, electrically speaking, Faraday cages. We disconnected ourselves from the electrical environment in which our bodies evolved to operate. This is where a growing field of research called grounding or earthing enters the picture. And I want to be careful here, because this is a field where the science is still evolving and where some claims have outpaced the evidence. So let me tell you what we know and what we don't. What we know, several studies, including research published in the Journal of Inflammation Research and the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, have found that when humans are brought back into conductive contact with the Earth, barefoot on soil, or connected through grounding equipment in controlled laboratory settings, measurable physiological changes occur. Reductions in blood viscosity, changes in cortisol rhythms, reductions in markers of inflammation, improved sleep patterns. These are not large-scale definitive trials. The sample sizes have been small, and the field is young. But the results have been consistent enough to attract serious attention from physiologists. Now, consider the tree. A tree is one of the most extraordinary electrical conductors in nature. Its roots extend deep into the earth, often as deep as the tree is tall, creating a vast conductive network that is in constant contact with the Earth's electrical charge. Its trunk, that column of living wood and bark your hand rests against, is a continuous conductive pathway from root to crown. Water and dissolved minerals flow through it constantly, carrying not just nutrients but electrical charge. When you place your hand on a tree, you are, in electrical terms, plugging yourself into a grounding wire that extends deep into the planet. You are completing a circuit. And the hypothesis, supported by preliminary research from organizations like the HeartMath Institute, which has been monitoring the bioelectrical activity of trees, is that this contact may help stabilize the electrical environment of your own body, allowing excess positive charge accumulated from synthetic environments, electronic devices, and insulated living to dissipate. I want to be transparent. This is at the frontier of what has been rigorously proven. The grounding research is promising, but not yet definitive. It has been published. It has been peer-reviewed. But it has also been criticized for small sample sizes and methodological limitations. I share it with you not as settled truth, but as a genuinely interesting line of inquiry, one that suggests our disconnect from the physical electrical world of nature may be costing us more than we realize. What is beyond dispute is this. The HeartMath Institute monitored several oak and redwood trees over extended periods and found that trees are not electrically passive. They exhibit their own bioelectrical rhythms. Their electrical activity changes with sunlight, with moisture levels, with the seasons. They are, in their own quiet way, electrical beings, just as we are. And the idea that two electrical beings, touching, might influence each other is not mysticism, it's physics. Let's shift now from the body to the mind. Because what happens in your brain when you stand among trees, when you slow down, reach out, and place your hand against living bark, is, in some ways, even more dramatic than what happens in your blood. In the 1980s and 1990s, the psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan at the University of Michigan developed something called attention restoration theory. Their work addressed a problem that, if you're living in the modern world, you almost certainly experience every single day: mental fatigue. The Kaplans observed that our capacity for focused attention, the kind of deliberate, effortful concentration required to work at a computer, drive in traffic, follow a complex conversation, make decisions, is a finite resource. It depletes. And when it depletes, we don't just feel tired, we become irritable, our decision-making deteriorates, our emotional regulation weakens, we become worse at everything, worse parents, worse partners, worse thinkers. Their breakthrough insight was this: certain environments actively restore depleted attention, while others continue to drain it. And the environments that restore attention share a specific set of qualities. They must offer what the Kaplans called soft fascination, stimulation that captures your awareness gently, without demanding concentration, a flickering flame, moving water, the pattern of light through leaves. Trees, it turns out, are masters of soft fascination, the movement of branches in wind, the fractal geometry of bark, the dappled pattern of sunlight filtering through a canopy. None of this demands your attention. All of it holds it. And in that gentle holding, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for directed attention and the part most exhausted by modern life, gets to rest. A study published in 2008 by Mark Berman and colleagues found that participants who took a walk through a tree-lined arboretum showed significant improvements in working memory and attention, compared to participants who walked through urban streets for the same duration, at the same pace. The trees weren't just pleasant, they were cognitively restorative in a way the city was not. But here's what I find most striking, and what brings us back to the specific act of touching. When you touch a tree, you add something to this equation that a mere visual experience cannot provide. You engage the somatosensory cortex, the part of the brain that processes touch. And you do so with a stimulus that is, neurologically speaking, deeply complex. Bark is not smooth. It is not uniform. Every square centimeter of it presents a different texture, a different temperature, a different microcontour. Your brain must process all of this in real time, and it does so using circuits that are ancient and deeply connected to your emotional brain. The act of touching bark brings you into what psychologists call the sensory present. You cannot touch a tree and be elsewhere. You cannot run your fingers along rough bark and simultaneously spin in the mental hurricane of tomorrow's deadlines and yesterday's regrets. Touch anchors you. It pulls you out of the abstraction of your thoughts and into the concrete, undeniable hardness of this moment, this surface, this temperature, this life under your fingertips. This is why therapists increasingly use nature-based touch as an intervention for anxiety and trauma. Not because it is magic, but because it engages neural circuits that directly compete with the circuits of rumination and fear. The somatosensory present and the anxious future cannot occupy the same neural territory at the same time. When you give your brain a rich, complex, natural texture to process, it has less bandwidth available for worry. And there is a deeper layer still. A 20-minute walk in a natural environment has been shown to reduce cortisol levels significantly. That finding, published in Frontiers in Psychology, established what many of us intuitively feel: nature calms us. But cortisol is not just a stress hormone. Chronically elevated cortisol suppresses immune function, impairs memory consolidation, disrupts sleep architecture, promotes visceral fat storage, and accelerates cellular aging. When we say nature reduces stress, we are not describing a minor quality of life improvement. We are describing a measurable intervention against the single most pervasive health threat of modern life: chronic, low-grade, unrelenting physiological stress. And what reduces cortisol most effectively? Not a glance at trees through a window, though even that helps. The strongest cortisol reductions come from immersive, multisensory engagement with nature, smell, sound, and above all, touch. Touch a tree, and you are deploying every weapon in nature's anti-stress arsenal simultaneously. You are inhaling phytoncides. You are engaging C-tactile afferents. You are grounding electrically. You are generating soft fascination. You are entering the sensory present. You are lowering cortisol. You are raising NK cells. You are doing all of this at the same time by standing still and placing your hand on bark. Now I want to take you somewhere unexpected. I want to take you underground, because the tree you're touching is not just a tree. It is a node in a network. Beneath the soil of every forest, every park, every tree-lined street, there exists a web of fungal threads called mycorrhizae. These are symbiotic fungi that attach to tree roots and extend outward through the soil, forming connections with other trees, sometimes hundreds of meters away. Through this network, trees exchange resources. Carbon, nitrogen, water, and phosphorus flow from tree to tree through fungal highways thinner than a human hair. This network became popularly known as the Wood Wide Web, and the metaphor captured the public imagination powerfully. The idea that trees talk to each other, that mother trees send resources to struggling seedlings, that forests are cooperative communities rather than collections of competing individuals. It's a beautiful story, and there is real science behind it. Suzanne Simard's pioneering research demonstrated that carbon does move between trees through mycorrhizal connections. That much is documented. But I want to be honest with you here, because intellectual honesty matters more than a good story. In 2023, a research team led by Justine Karst at the University of Alberta published a significant review paper in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. They examined over 1,600 citations in the Wood Wide Web literature and found that many of the most popular claims, that trees preferentially send resources to their offspring, that they warn neighbors of pest attacks through the network, that the network functions as a cooperative communication system, had been overstated or misrepresented in the popular retelling. The evidence for resource transfer exists. The evidence for intentional communication and cooperative behavior through these networks is far less clear. So why do I bring this up? Because I think the real story is actually more interesting than the fairy tale. What is beyond dispute is this. Every tree is physically, biologically, chemically connected to the ecosystem around it in ways that are vastly more complex than what meets the eye. The fungal network is real. The chemical exchanges are real. The tree you are touching is not an isolated object. It is participating at this very moment in a web of biological relationships that extends through the soil beneath your feet, into the air around your head, and through the root systems of trees you cannot see. When you place your hand on a tree, you are not touching one organism. You are touching the surface of an interconnected living system. The bark under your fingers is a boundary, a membrane between you and a world of staggering biological complexity. The phytoncides you inhale are part of the tree's conversation with its environment. The electrical charge flowing through the trunk is part of the tree's relationship with the earth itself. And you, standing there, hand against bark, breathing, warm, alive, you are, for that moment, part of that system too. Not metaphorically, chemically, electrically, immunologically. You are participating. There is something in that participation that goes beyond what any single study can capture. It is the sum of all these mechanisms working together. Pesticides and cortisol reduction and electrical grounding and tactile restoration and immune activation, all operating simultaneously in a single moment of contact that makes the act of touching a tree so disproportionately powerful relative to how simple it appears. High in the White Mountains of eastern California, there stands a bristlecone pine tree named Methuselah. It is over 4,800 years old. It was a seedling when the pyramids at Giza were being built. It has been alive through the rise and fall of every civilization in recorded human history. It has endured ice ages, droughts, volcanic winters, and the complete transformation of the world around it. And it is still alive, still growing, still releasing phytoncides into the mountain air, still conducting the Earth's electrical charge from root to crown. There is something humbling about that, not in an abstract philosophical way, but in a visceral physical way. When you touch a tree, any tree, you are touching a life form that belongs to a lineage older than your species. Trees appeared on Earth roughly 350 million years ago. Homo sapiens has been here for roughly 300,000 years. Trees outnumber us in time by a factor of more than 1,000, And for almost all of those 300,000 years, we lived among them. We slept in their branches and later beneath their canopies. We ate their fruit. We burned their wood for warmth. We carved tools from their limbs and shelters from their trunks. We breathed their oxygen, because a single mature oak produces roughly 260 pounds of oxygen per year, enough to sustain 2 to 4 human beings. The relationship between humans and trees is not a modern wellness trend. It is the oldest relationship in our species' history, older than agriculture, older than language possibly, older than religion. Before we had words, we had trees, and our bodies remember this. This is the biophilia that Wilson described. Not a preference, not a lifestyle choice, a biological inheritance. Your nervous system was sculpted by millennia of life among trees. Your immune system evolved in an atmosphere saturated with phytoncides. Your stress response was calibrated in a world where the canopy overhead was the ceiling and the roots beneath your feet were the floor. We didn't leave that world by choice, exactly. We left it by increment. One invention at a time, one concrete slab at a time, one generation at a time, until one day we looked around and realized that most of us live in environments where the nearest tree is something we drive past without seeing, and our bodies are paying the price. The epidemiological data is now overwhelming. People who live near green spaces have lower rates of depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease, and all-cause mortality. A landmark study in the Lancet Planetary Health found that greater residential greenness was associated with significantly reduced mortality even after controlling for socioeconomic factors. Trees, quite literally, extend human life. But you don't need a forest. You don't need a national park. You don't need a weekend retreat. You need 5 minutes and 1 tree. So here is what I'm asking you to do. And I know how small it sounds, and I know that smallness might make you dismiss it. But listen, tomorrow morning, or this afternoon, or right now if you can, walk outside. Find a tree, any tree. It can be the one on your street that you've walked past 1,000 times without noticing, the one in the park, the one in your backyard. Stand in front of it. Place your hand on the bark and stay there. Not for an hour, not even for 10 minutes if you don't have them. Just stand there hand on bark for 60 seconds. Feel the texture. Feel the temperature. Feel the roughness under your fingertips and the solidity of something that has been standing in that spot through seasons you never noticed. Breathe. Just breathe. Let the phytoncides do their invisible work. Let the C-tactile afferents fire. Let the cortisol drop. Let your attention, exhausted and scattered and overdrawn, settle into the sensory present of this one, quiet, ancient act of contact. You won't feel a lightning bolt. You won't have a revelation. What you'll feel, if you're honest, is something much subtler and much more important, a small, quiet sense of coherence, a feeling that something, somewhere, has clicked back into place. That's not mysticism. That's your biology recognizing something it has been missing. A tree will never send you a notification. It will never demand your attention, sell you anything, or ask anything of you at all. It will simply stand there, breathing out what you breathe in, anchored in the earth you walk on, alive in a way that has nothing to do with urgency and everything to do with endurance. Touch it. Every day. And let your body remember what it already knows.